So I had some contemplation on how to start this today. And jokingly, I had suggested to Andrea, how about I start with this new impression I've been working on? And she's like, yes. And then I was like, no, it's a joke. I'm not going to do that. It's not very good. It's a little niche. So
now we want to hear it.
all right. Maybe we cut this out of the broadcast. I don't know. So there's a famous sports newscaster, Harry Carey. You guys know Harry Carey? And Will Ferrell did an impression of him on SNL and David Letterman. And I do an impression of the impression. Okay? So I believe he's talking to, forgetting his name now, Jeff Goldblum. Thank you. Jeff Goldblum's playing this scientist who's been going over all this new planets and discoveries in space, and Harry Carey looks over to him and he goes, "Oh, hey, let me ask you something. What if the moon was made of barbecued spare ribs? Would you eat it then?" Nothing? All right. I think I'd have seconds. Okay. That has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. I just wanted to do that. So, yeah. Gets people loose. Gets me nervous. So, my first question I have today is, by show of hands, who doesn't have enough stress in their life? No one? Okay. How about enough worry? You guys not worrying enough? Okay. Looks like there's plenty of worry. How about enough pain? Who's like, I got a pretty pain-free life? No? Okay. How about, is life too easy? Anybody think life is too easy? You're like, man, I've had it good. I could really use some more issues cropping up right now. No one? Okay. Not a lot of people are longing for more pain and heartache. But the tricky thing is that anything worth doing is going to be hard. Anything worth doing is going to be hard. Some hard things in life that are worth doing: parenting, marriage, starting a business, having integrity, being a leader, learning an instrument, perfecting a craft like impressions. It's not easy. Being a Christian. Being a Christian is extremely hard. I know that we sometimes think that it's going to be an easy path, right? And there are some people out there who will tell you it's a bill of goods. As long as you believe hard enough and pray enough, nothing bad is ever going to happen, but that's just not the case. But through all of these things, the most difficult part of all of it is not quitting. Not quitting is hard. In fact, usually when things get hard and you want to quit, it takes something from deep inside of you to pull through, to dig down and find faith, to find motivation, to follow through with what you're doing. And there's a famous quote that says, "Know this, if quitting is in your vocabulary, then quitting is in your future." I hear something similar to this a lot in people who talk about their marriage, right? Like, we don't even bring up divorce. It's not on the table. If it's not going to be discussed, if it's not talked about, then it's not an option. Right? So if quitting is not talked about, if it's not something you think about, if it's not in your vocabulary, then odds are it's not going to be in your future. It's a very hard word to remove, though. Quitting is just a part of life. Right? Quitting some things can be good. Right? Not long ago we talked about dealing with habits, addictions, things like that. Those are, of course, good to quit. But a rule of thumb I follow is, if it's good, keep doing it. If it's bad, quit. If it's not bad, don't quit. It seems very simple, but when you lay it out, it can mean a lot more. Jesus himself did not quit. But yet, even though he understands deeply the desire to want to quit, but still he has finished every task he set out to do. Quitting is easy and almost always the wrong choice. So this series of Been There, we have been talking about Jesus being places, Jesus understanding where we're coming from, the experiences that we're going through, that he has felt what we have felt, and he understands us. Jesus has wanted to quit. We have talked about this passage a few times the past couple of weeks. It's been brought up. And trust me, it's not due to lazy writing, although some of you might believe that. In my experience, when something comes up multiple times for different applications, there's a reason for it. It's supposed to be brought up again. So the application that we are looking at this week is in Mark 14:36. This is Jesus saying, Abba, Father, he cried out. Everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Your will to be done, not mine. And then in John 19:30, he says, it is finished. And with that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Right? It was not a second before the crucifixion happened. It wasn't during the beatings, during the humiliation, during the pain that he gave up. It's when he said it is finished. This can be applied directly, to an act or thing, right? A situation, to not give up. But I also want to look at another way Jesus did not give up, and that's through a person. It's a bit of a roundabout way, so hang with me. So there's this guy named Simon, who most of us know as Peter. And his story is pretty long, so I'm going to hit some of the main points on it, okay? So Simon was a fisherman, meets Jesus. He's one of the first chosen as the disciples. And Jesus says, I want you to be a fisher of man, not a fisher of fish anymore, right? Then he changes his name from Simon to Peter. He sees in him, you are the rock, you are the cornerstone, I will build my church on. You are Peter now. Then we fast forward a lot to the Last Supper. And in this time, Jesus is saying, you're all going to betray me. You're all going to turn your backs on me. And Peter being like, no, maybe these guys, not me. I would never do that. Are you kidding me? And I could almost picture how awkward it would have been when Jesus responds, no, you're not only going to do it once, you're going to do it 3 times. And that's before the sun comes up. Sucks all the air out of the room. From this, Jesus brings him as one of the disciples to go to the garden with him. Right? We learned about the olive grove, the garden, the garden of pressing. And he says, stand watch. I'm going to go pray. Give me just a little time alone. And he just states that he would not deny Jesus and that that's such an outrageous thing that he would accuse him of. And he can't even stay awake for a little bit. Peter falls asleep. And then Jesus comes and wakes him up and he says, now is the time that I'm going to be turned over. Right? The deceiver is here. The betrayer has arrived. And so the guards show up, and Peter, in his foolishness, gets defensive. Draws a sword and lobs one of the guy's ears off. That's not what Jesus was insinuating. It doesn't seem like he was paying much attention to what was going on. But Peter acts out what he believes is right to do. Then he's there when Jesus is crucified. And in that time, after shortly, they call him out. Right? Hey, aren't you the guy that was hanging out with Jesus? Aren't you friends with him? And he goes, nope, not me. Again and again. And it says in his story that after that 3rd time, the rooster crowed and he remembered what Jesus had said. And he began weeping and crying and ran away. So we see that Peter's a bit of a fool, a bit of a hothead. But through that we can see that he still really cares. That this breaks his heart. Then Jesus is buried and is resurrected. Peter is one of the ones that sees that the tomb is empty. We then jump forward a little bit while Jesus is still here. And Peter's fishing on a boat for fish, right? Not doing what he was supposed to do. And so Jesus calls out to him, and he has a conversation with him, and he asks him, do you believe in who I am? Right? Do you understand what you are called to do? Do you believe me? Peter replies, yes, of course. So then Jesus tells him, feed my flock, watch the sheep. And Jesus does this 2 more times, and the third time Peter is upset, a little heartbroken that Jesus wouldn't trust him. He'd had to ask him 3 times. Well, kind of lines up with 3 denials. But he answered all of them with yes, of course, Lord. And at this, we see that Peter is reinstated in his task. Peter then goes on to preach at Pentecost, and it's known as one of the greatest sermons in the early church, with over 3,000 people being saved that day. If you've been paying attention to all these points, we can see that Peter had a moment that he gave up on Jesus. A pretty big one, too, if you ask me. But Jesus didn't give up on him through all of it. And I think if Jesus can do that with him, then Jesus is not giving up on us. Because how often do we have these struggles in our lives where we deny, where we run, where we know what we're supposed to do, and we just do the opposite? Or we quit, or we give up. Things are too hard, things are too painful, things are too stressful. But we're not giving up on. So, of course, Jesus not giving up and all the hardship and pain he had to go through is extremely great. Is an amazing example. And there's nothing more loving than that. But I also love this example of knowing who Peter was and showing us that he's not going to give up on us. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter what you do. He's not going to give up on you. Through all that we can lose hope or feel like we can experience no more without breaking, it is the grace under the pressure and the love and forgiveness that will shape us into who God is planning for us to be. Difficulty stinks. Pain stinks. Stress and worry are awful. But it is through these times that we learn and grow. It is through these times that God is shaping us into who we are supposed to be. How many events can you see, looking back in your life, that God has sought you through? Something you never would have imagined. And not only sought you through, but looking back now, you can see your Pentecost moment. That if I hadn't been faithful here, that wouldn't have happened. And that is worth all of it. Quitting is easy. Giving up is easy. Being faithful is hard. So what are we not supposed to give up on next? Right, this whole time I've been talking about quitting and giving up. And then it's the difficult things that are worth it. I'd be surprised if something didn't come to mind for you guys. Think about it. What are you not supposed to give up on next? And in knowing how difficult it is, and understanding that Jesus set the example on what we're supposed to do. Also, keep in mind, seeing that through, what the next Pentecost will be in your life. What is that next milestone? What is that next amazing thing you never could have imagined doing? Because that makes it a little less difficult. I toyed back and forth a lot on how personal I was going to get with this. And I still am. I was kind of hoping it would be a little later on my time and I could just skip it. But it's not. I'm moving too fast. Life is hard. Life is difficult. I don't like quitting. I don't like giving up. Because now I've seen what comes out of not quitting and not giving up. It was just a little over a decade ago now that I tried to quit fully my life. And if that had happened, I'd missed out on so much. But through all of that pain and heartache, I was given just a little sliver from God saying, just have faith through this time. Just hold on a little bit longer. And I did. And here we are now. Never could have guessed it. So what are you supposed to not give up on next? What is your Pentecost? If you need help in seeing where God has molded you in the pain, don't forget to look back. And if you are tired and broken and feel like you are hopeless, I am here. God is here. We are here for you. We are not isolated in this church. We are a family for a reason. We have each other for a reason. Don't just quit. Don't just sit forcing yourself to try to get through without quitting by yourself. That's not what we were designed for. It's not what God asks of us. So I'm going to close out with prayer. And if anybody has felt anything, right? If you need prayer, if you need to talk to someone, I'm more than happy to. Aaron is, Harrison is. We have a great group of elders. Use your family. That's what we're here for. Let's pray.